There are up to 2 med spas for every Starbucks in America right now. And you know who really sees what's happening inside them? It's not patients. It's not regulators, it's the sales reps, and they know which ones are breaking the law. Today, I sit down with Rachel Phillips, a licensed master esthetician and sales rep who's walked into over 100 med spas every single month for the past 20 years. Rachel's seen doctors panic calling her to train the front desk person to conduct a laser treatment. She's watched practices advertise one product while injecting something completely different. She talks about the pressure from her own companies to make sales she knew could potentially hurt patients. You'll learn what marketing really tells about a med spa's priorities and why some reps will sell to anyone, while others walk away when they see a bad situation. Stick around because Rachel explains what it really means when a med spa is advertising on Groupon. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the truth about what's really happening in med spas. And now let's get into it. So Rachel, thanks so much for coming and talking with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I know that you've basically seen it all, and you've basically worked for skincare, you've worked for pharma, you've worked for device companies. So you've kind of seen the ins and outs of all of that. What are like the biggest things that strike you about the industry today, or the biggest issues or the craziest things that you've seen?
I am able to have this conversation with you today because I'm not working in pharma. I'm working in a skincare organization that is not FDA regulated. So previous jobs, we've connected many times, but I wanted to come on and talk with you, but I haven't been able to because of where I was employed. And now that I'm in a skincare role that's not prescription, we can have conversations. But some of the craziest things I've seen in my industry, knowing that I started in a doctor's office as a master esthetician and then came out of the doctor's office to go into sales. So I came into sales in 2004. And in those days, they kind of called you a fence jumper. You were on the inside and now you're on the outside. And, you know, some people were positive and some people were like, oh gosh, now you're one of them. And so it was my personal relationship building and becoming a sales rep that was trustworthy and respectable for all of these customers over the years. That was really important to me. And I think that's why I've been able to stay within the business for a long time and be able to do that. But yes, I have seen crazy things on the rep side, crazy things on the account side as well. And sometimes as a sales rep, we're put into positions to sell when we don't think is inappropriate, or be pushed to sell when it's not appropriate, or vice versa. An account or a MD could ask me to do something that I'm not comfortable doing. And that's happened before too, where I've had to say no and risk losing that sale and losing that account because of something I'm not comfortable doing. So it kind of goes both ways.
Let's dig into that. So let's cover the company side first. So So have you been pressured to sell to people who can't legally really buy it or use it?
Yeah, you have a sales quota. You have to make an existing business grow, and you have to open new customers. So in that process of identifying new customers, if you find out that you're selling to somebody, let's say you're selling a filler or a toxin, and you have the request to go visit this account, and you realize that there isn't a medical director and that the esthetician is injecting, I'm not going to make that sale. Once I get there and realize that there isn't a medical director on site, that the medical director is not there, and the person injecting is an esthetician, then I'm obviously not going to open that account. But if you could, because they have a medical director, but the medical director is not there and they're having an esthetician inject. The companies typically won't train estheticians to inject. So then the injector is untrained and unlicensed. So in that case, I would not feel comfortable opening that account because the end user is not using my products legally or responsibly. And you have to think about being a sales rep. If your products are going to be in facilities or locations that are not using them right, something's going to happen, and that could be reflected on you or possibly your injectable.
Right.
Because it's real easy to blame the injectable versus the injector.
But don't those companies require at least a signature of the medical director to have an account at all?
They do. Yeah, they absolutely do. But that can be done via DocuSign. If you're not paying attention and you're not really, going in person to open that account, maybe you're just doing it via email, you may not really know who the end user is and who's really injecting that product. And, the state of Montana, the state of Idaho lets estheticians inject, but no company will train an esthetician to inject. So they're not trained, but they're injecting and complications happen. And then they blame the injectable company. So those are just risks that, most reps aren't willing to take that risk, but some will because they need the business or they want to, get in an order. But it's the long game that I've always looked at. I know that I'm going to be in this business for a long time. I could be here 20, 30 years. You're an existing account in my territory. I could be calling on you for all 20, 30 of those years. So I have to make sure I'm bringing you good products to use and sell. And then I have to make sure you're following the rules, or else, this is a symbiotic relationship. When you're successful, I'm successful, and vice versa. If you're doing well, I'm doing well. We're in this together. And some reps just don't see it that way. It's a one and done.
Right.
One sale out the door. Typically a laser sale can be like that if they're not looking for repeat business. But consumables, where I've been most of my career, I was in lasers for 4 years, tend to be a little bit different. But there's just certain things that you're willing to do, and there's certain things you're not willing to do because it could set you up for failure later.
And I think that there's a parallel to that in the med spa world too. So on the rep side, like I've had a couple reps who I've known from the beginning of my career in aesthetics, and they've played the long game, right? And they care about relationship building and making sure that we're successful and legal, right? And there are other reps who just want to sell you stuff today and they don't care about tomorrow, and they don't care whether it's legal, and they don't care. I mean, they just want to sell the most today, right? And I think that that's really true on the med spa side too. There's plenty of med spas that really care about high quality care, outcomes. They want you as a long-term patient. They're going to not lie to you. They're going to not upsell you on something you don't really need. And because, and I speak for myself, we're relying on our relationship long-term for us to succeed and for you to succeed as our patient, right?
Yeah.
But there are tons of places that are placing Google ads or Groupon ads or trying to get 1 million people in the door, and they just want to sell you a package today, and they don't even care if you come back and ever complete it. And and those are the ones that need 100 new patients every month in order to keep going. Right. And it's just a different. Yes. And so it's just like a different game they're playing. Right. Yeah. And obviously for me, like obviously I like reps like you who care about the end, the end result, right? What are some of these crazy things that you've seen going on out there?
Yeah. So I think when we last talked, I said that there are 2 med spas for every 1 Starbucks. So this business is huge. And if we really put that into context, it's absolutely huge what business we are now in, where, 20, 30 years ago, it was very small. And, Botox has only been FDA approved for now just over 20 years. So the industry is so large, but there just isn't enough credentialing. Whereas me as a consumer / rep, you may not know where you're going. So crazy stories would be, I sold a laser to a doctor who was in a panic, calls me and says, "Hey, my esthetician just quit. Can you train my front desk person to do this treatment so we don't have to cancel the patient?" And I'm like, I absolutely cannot do that.
Wow.
So there's that side of it. And then the doctor's upset, and then they call your boss, and you have to, explain the whole situation. And then there's sales reps that probably would have just gone in and done the treatment themselves to save the day. So there's all sorts of rhymes or reason as to why crazy things happen.
Can you explain why? So if you've been listening to the show, you know I've got stories for days about what goes on in med spas. I finally put them all in a book. It's called Med Spa Mayhem. I wrote it because I got tired of hearing about people getting hurt by providers who have no business holding a syringe. You'll read about real patients, real nightmares, but more importantly, you'll know exactly what to look for when you walk into any med spa and what questions to ask. It's part expose, part survival guide. and it might just save your life. Med Spa Mayhem will leave you informed, entertained, and a little shocked at what's really going on behind the business of the aesthetics industry. The link is in the episode description. Read it before you book your next appointment, because beauty should never come at the cost of your safety. That's just not reasonable, a not reasonable request. Maybe
it's not a reasonable request. So the front desk person is not a licensed master esthetician, so they aren't legally allowed to fire that laser. So that's number one. And
I guess for our audience too, because we have a national audience, there are only, as far as I know, 8 states that allow. So master esthetician is a designation and an actual license in Washington State, where we both live, and that exists in 8 states, I believe, nationally, but the vast majority of wherever you're listening or watching this podcast, that's not even legal. And there are different laws in every state, but in some states you have to be at least an RN. In other states, you actually have to be a doctor. I think there's 2 states where you actually have to be a doctor to fire a laser.
Yeah.
So you can't just train your front desk person to run a machine. Yeah.
No. And I suggested that the doctor complete the treatment or reschedule the appointment, which would be the smartest thing. But he was already booked with his own surgical load that day and couldn't. But I had to remind the doctors why that wasn't legal to do and not a good idea. And he was like, oh yeah, that's right. So sometimes we're the ones helping people stay within the rules, and sometimes we're the ones breaking the rules. So you're going to get 2 different types of sales consultants. I've had to tell doctors, you can't do that. It's not legal. That's not a good idea. And here's why. So I've always told my customers, I'm going to tell you the right way to do it and the legal way to do it and the way you're supposed to. But when I leave, if you want to make that decision, feel free. That's up to you. I can't stop you. I was selling a very expensive device, $200,000 laser direct from the manufacturer, which is how you're supposed to sell it, because it's been tested and safe and credentialed. And in that sale process, the physician let me know that the same laser was for sale on eBay, and that if I didn't cut him a good enough deal, he was just going to buy it on eBay. And so I went into his office and I sat down with him and I said exactly why buying a laser on eBay isn't good. You have to pay the recertification fee. You have to buy the consumables, even though you think there are none. There's still things you have to buy. And you're using something that's been on the secondhand market that may not be safe to use on your patients that are paying premium for this treatment. And he ended up buying it from me begrudgingly. But those are the deals we get into. I can give you the best deal possible, but there's a sale there and there's a price there, and we have to honor that price from the manufacturer and make sure that you're maintaining your service history and service records with those really expensive lasers, which, as you know, can cost millions of dollars to just buy the lasers you need and keep them updated and keep them safe to use on your patients. And consumers don't know that. They don't know that lasers cost as much as Ferraris, that I'm selling Ferraris.
They are extraordinarily expensive. They're also very delicate medical devices.
Very delicate.
I want to explain also for our audience that, so if you were going to buy that laser off of eBay, that's like buying a used car. You don't know where it's been. That's fine. Okay. In order to go to the manufacturer and have them maintain it in any way or get any replacement parts or fix it, you have to pay what's called a recertification fee. And I honestly, I've never paid that, but the going rate is $35,000, $40,000 as far as I understand, generally. Okay. So in order to turn around and use that laser, you could use it until you have any needs for it. So most lasers these days have some kind of consumable that you have to buy. There are parts that wear out, even just the little window or there's a lot of little pieces that you need to maintain, and you will not be able to buy those if you don't pay the recertification fee. So that immediately makes your laser that you bought for cheap like a lot more expensive. And then you need to make sure that it's maintained properly. So it's not like all used devices are useless, but lasers in particular are very, very difficult to maintain. They're very finicky. They're very delicate. There's all these little things that can go wrong with them. So there are other devices that are energy devices that are a little easier to maintain that
Easier,
you might
yeah, for
you
sure.
might be able to get an outside company to maintain it for you. But again, replacement parts, someone will have, it's just like getting a used car and you can no longer get a new part from the manufacturer. So you got to rate a junkyard.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. So these companies that maintain these used lasers, and there's nothing wrong with this business, but it's just really hard to do. So they'll get a used one that doesn't work and they rate it for parts and then they charge, money to. So it's not a minor issue buying used lasers. It's a really big deal. So I always decided like I didn't want to deal with that. I wanted to know that my laser was not going to harm anybody, that it was going to get the results I wanted. But that's kind of that's behind all that, right? So I just want people to understand that because it's a really messy, a lot of people, especially newer people in the industry, really want to buy devices and they don't want to pay the expensive, the ridiculous price for it. So they're looking around, they're trying to find the best deal.
Yeah. I think we see that in Facebook groups, in some of the Facebook aesthetic groups, every other post is a med spa selling their devices because they can't afford the lease payments and they can't sell them on the secondary market because of those recertification fees and all of those issues. I mean, I'm seeing that now because of where our economy is going. They purchase those devices with high interest rates. There's, prepayment penalties. There's all sorts of debacles that business owners gotten themselves into, and how they bought that laser, maybe under pressure from the sales rep, or they just didn't understand what they were buying.
Right. Yeah. Well, financing is a whole other issue. That's a total scam. I wrote about that in my book.
It is. All financing is. I feel like all financing is, but specifically in the laser business, when I was negotiating a deal, I would always push the business owner who's buying the laser to get their own outside financing with no prepayment penalties and a good interest rate from a local business bank first.
Right.
And then if you couldn't qualify through that, then maybe look at some of these other lenders that are a little bit more unscrupulous and have more rules.
Yeah. But then you have to wonder why you can't qualify, right? Like, I mean,
well, a lot of them can't. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why, right? Like, I mean, I have to say that as a physician. So I was given really good advice by a laser rep who I also wrote about in my book, who gave me good advice. And he was like, no. And he actually connected me with a local commercial bank and I got like a regular loan, which works as like kind of a regular business or equipment loan where they give you a relatively low interest rate and it's reasonable terms and you can pay it off as needed, kind of like a regular mortgage, right? And the equipment loan companies are out there. They're basically predatory loans, kind of like back in the whole real estate, debacle. And with mortgage resellers, or like a rent to own place that you're essentially paying a, 36% annual fee and you can't prepay your loan. You owe like basically all of the interest that you would have paid over the next 5 years. You owe it all anyway, even if you prepay.
Yeah.
So
it's a when somebody's like, oh, I'm interested in buying a laser. I'm like, okay. Oh my goodness. Right. And when you're selling lasers, you want to sell the laser, but you also want the physician to be able to pay for the laser. Some companies, if the physician or the practice can't pay for the laser and it's done by in-house financing, they'll take the laser back. And then that's called a clawback. And then the rep loses the commission that they earned on the initial sale. So they pull that out of your paycheck. We call those clawbacks. So you never want to sell in a device and have them not make the payments and have it clawed back. So you have to be a smart laser sales rep knows that practice has been qualified to purchase the laser even before they set up the demo. Just like if you and I wanted to go to Medina, a really wealthy area, and look at a $20 million house, we would need to have a loan guarantee or a letter from our lender saying that we could qualify for that loan before we were even stepped foot in that house. In the laser business, I would get 20, 30 calls of people wanting to demo my newest laser, but I would have to actually qualify them to make sure they could buy the laser before I even thought about demoing, because I could be spending all week demoing and none of them would be qualified to purchase or have the funds available to do so.
Just to bring that home for our audience, that if you don't live in the Seattle area, that would be like one of us going to like try to buy Bill Gates' house, which probably worth more than that even. Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Without, pre-qualifying that, like, well, we have the money to do that, which, that's
available funds. You'll get a letter that says, yes, you can buy this house. Now you can go look at it. In our world of lasers, you just get the call that this practice wants to demo the device, but then you need to do the groundwork to make sure that, they want to demo. Right. And yes, they are set up to purchase the device. So some reps have now had to come in because their device is expensive. Maybe their device is $200K. They've had to say, I need a proof of funds or a proof of financing before I'll bring it in and demo.
I kind of want to relate all of this to why this matters for consumers. People are going in for their first Botox or laser hair removal. Why all of this matters? Because like I wrote about this a bit, and I know that you and we were talking, giving an estimate for like what percentage of med spas out there right now in 2025, that we're at the end of 2025, is operating illegally? What do you think?
I mean, there's different parts that could be legal, and there's different parts that could be illegal. They could have the medical director in place, but they're not doing a GFE.
Yeah,
because they have a nurse doing the injectable. So there's lots of little parts to that are so important.
I mean, my estimate that I've been saying is at least half are illegal.
Yeah.
And
or you have an injector that just opened up her own, she just leased a suite at Sola Studios and she's going out on her own. Her medical director is, in a different part of town, and she's cranking. She's seeing patients every 30, 45 minutes, and there's no GFE happening. She's just injecting. And sometimes as a sales rep, you have to say, hey, you have to do this the right way, because this will be an issue, and you will get in trouble at some point. Yes. You will have a vascular inclusion. It's if not when, it's when. When's that going to happen? And do you have the appropriate backing to fix it?
Yeah. I mean, they'll run into complications. That's a big thing. So as a patient walking into one of these places, the chances of having a complication in a place working like that doesn't have a proper good faith exam, that's what GFE means. Was much, much higher. But also, there's starting to be arrests of those people, because it's a felony to do that. And there was just a nurse in Arizona that was arrested for exactly that. So your place that you think, well, they always done a good job before, this person might be very sincere and a very good injector, but still operating illegally. And they could end up in handcuffs. So
it's scary, because I mean, I could go to my nearest city and probably come up with at least 20 that aren't doing it the right way. They're doing it. Parts of it are not done the right way. Yeah. And you would never know that as a patient, but as a sales rep, I do know that, and I can provide advice as to why it's a bad idea, because I am trained on those, topics from specific companies that I work for, and certain training initiatives. So when you're working in filler and you go to train somebody, chances are you have to type in their RN license or their MD license to complete that training and to provide our certificate. And so all those things have to be in place. So if anybody's going to know if something's not right, chances are it might be the rep that would identify that and maybe be able to say something. But there's not a lot we could do as a sales rep. They're going to do it anyway.
But the rep has no incentive to say anything about that, because that hurts their bottom line, and they're for themselves, but also their company. Like they're making, a fair amount of money selling, thousands and thousands of med spas that are doing this illegally. So, and the thing is that, there hasn't been any enforcement. There have been very, very little enforcement up till now. So, there were a few arrests before COVID. There were a number of arrests that made the news. but those charges kind of didn't, those charges ended up getting dropped, even though those same laws were broken. And then until this most recent arrest, there have been a number of estheticians who've been arrested. But interestingly, the estheticians not only were injecting illegally, but they were also buying illegal product off the internet because they couldn't legally buy it from Allergan or any of the big companies. And so there have been a number of arrests there. But this last one in Arizona was the first one I've seen that actually, like, they did a whole investigation and they arrested this nurse who was basically practicing. She's practicing for a doctor who didn't have a license in that state. But then also she was doing her own good faith exam, which is not legal for a nurse to do. And they led her away in handcuffs. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that case. I mean, it's a terrible test case because, she wasn't doing anything that a lot of other people weren't doing. But at the same time, she knew she was doing it.
And it happens every day here locally in Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, Seattle. It happens every day here. And it's, there's interesting credentialing outside of aesthetics. So for instance, if you're in my previous background was retail. So if you're Nordstrom's or a Saks or a Bloomingdale's and you want to bring in Chanel, you want to have a Chanel boutique inside of your store, you have to pass certain credentialing and have certain levels of sales reps to have that boutique within your store. It has to be at a certain volume, at a certain level, with a certain demographic for Chanel to bring that in. And you have to check all these boxes.
Rules implemented by the company selling you.
By the vendor. Vendor. They have this certain checklist of everything that has to be done to be able to bring their product into your store, quote unquote. And I would like to see vendors at some point have that level of credentialing to make their brands an upper echelon brand, a level of credentialing as well on the vendor side. Like, hey, we are bringing this product into this med spa or this doctor's office because they are qualified to be able to use our product and use it appropriately. And some companies have done that. Sientra did that with their breast implants. You had to be a board certified plastic surgeon to be able to have Sientra implants. So one company's done it. Amongst a lot of pushback from all the other types of physicians that do breast implants, that buy other types of breast implants, Sientra is the only company that's been able to do that. But I see a window where that could be that upper echelon of product selling to that, completely legit account, doing things the right way. So there's one side from the vendor side, and then there's the other side having a board, much like the med spa board, where you could go to as a consumer and visually identify who's doing things the right way as well. So I'd like to see it on both sides.
Well, we are trying. So we just launched, as of this recording, we're in mid-December now. We just launched at the beginning of December, and we have our first 10 spas that we're almost done credentialing now. I think we have 6 so far on the website. It would be great to get industry, help and influence with that. That would be phenomenal. I mean, we're trying to spread the word so that all the legit med spas will actually get credentialed. They'll get credited so that they can advertise that. And then that will be recognizable. It would be some recognizable emblem of a place that's actually legit. Because it's just been, it's in the 20 years that you've been, I mean, because for me, it's been not quite 11 years, or it's been actually just exactly 11 years for me. And the industry went from, there were something like 3,000 med spas back when I started. And now the estimate is well over 20,000 spas, if you count kind of all the, things in shopping malls and all the little ones. And
I believe it. Yeah. I mean, I can't keep track.
And I don't think that actually includes plastic surgery and dermatology offices if they don't call it a med spa. So it's probably even higher than that. It's kind of crazy. So, my hope is there's got to be some way for consumers to tell which place is okay to go to without having to ask all the questions themselves. Because, in order to sleuth, because we've kind of covered a lot of these things, right? In order to figure out, is this place operating legally? There's so many questions to ask because there are so many different laws that they could be skirting around, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, there's so many. There's even the fact that, some consumers feel that, oh, well, they sell Botox, they must be legitimate because Botox is made by Allergan, which is owned by AbbVie. That's a legitimate company. And then you go in and you have your appointment and you find that they're not even injecting Botox. They're advertising it as Botox, but that's not what you're getting injected. You're getting injected some other product. So we have that whole, fish to fry.
They could be using another legitimate FDA approved product, and they're just kind of, maybe doing a little bait and switch, but not doing anything illegal. That's kind of a a tactic, right? A marketing tactic.
Yeah. Which actually now Allergan's cracking down on that. You can't advertise Botox if you're not a Botox customer. But I mean, there's so many practices.
And that's very hard for I'm sure that they've got a giant legal team to try to enforce that.
But you can't keep up. Yeah.
There was one story in my book where it was a nurse practitioner with a med spa who constantly had a Juvederm Groupon ad all the time. And the Allergan rep told me, oh yeah, they haven't bought Juvederm in years. And I'm like, well, how does that work? But it's a bait and switch thing. The person buys the Groupon and they have to honor the dollar value of that Groupon, but they don't have to honor the service or the product. So you walk in and this person would upsell them to Bellafill, and nobody ever got injected with Juvederm, but they were able to use Juvederm as a keyword or whatever and sell people something that was well known. Yeah. So
it's never ending. And that's what's so tough when you're a sales rep, and you're calling on physicians and medical spas. And it's like, you're just trying to do the best you can. You're being legitimate. You're setting up legitimate accounts and relationships. And it's like, then you have a customer go rogue or do something crazy, or you have a rep go rogue and do something crazy. Like there's so many things that fall into play with this side of our business that there's just not, a ton of optics on it all, because there's so much room for something haywire to happen.
Yeah.
The consumer has no idea. Like, when I talk to my girlfriends who are lay people, they're not in medical. I just came back from a girls' trip. And of course, they're asking me, what are you using? What are you doing? Have you heard of this? Have you done that? Should I get this laser treatment? And I'm like, yeah, no, don't do any of that. And they're so disappointed. They're like, but I wanted to, if I just spend this much money and I do this skin tightening treatment and I do this. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're going to spend the money and you're not going to get the result you want. You actually need this or you need that.
Right.
And it's money that's being spent on things that may not be correct for the patient.
Well,
which is
and
hard to hear.
I don't want people to take home that nothing's worth it, because there are some things that are super duper worth
for
it.
sure.
And
100%.
hopefully you can find somebody who's an actual medical provider who's not just selling hype, who will actually, do things that do work and discourage you from doing anything that doesn't make any medical sense. And hopefully they don't offer the things that are illogical medically. I mean, that's kind of how I think of it, as, when the hype doesn't match anything that physiology would respond to, It's just like, why are people doing that? But there are some really great treatment. I'm going to go get my RF microneedling on Friday of this week, because, I've been doing, that's been my mainstay, that plus laser resurfacing. And I'm almost 58. So I feel like, it's doing okay. I got no filler in my face. So I want people to realize there are things that really do work.
Oh, of course. There's gold standard treatments.
There are some really great treatments, but there are so many dangerous ones. And I have to say that even that treatment that I'm about to get, so, my nurse practitioner who works with me in my office is doing that. And she's done many, probably thousands by this time. And same device in the wrong hands could really do a lot of damage. Okay.
Oh, for sure.
could really actually, scar me, could potentially cause some fat damage, which would be terrible. So I just think it's really important to make sure that you find somebody who's really well credentialed, really knows what they're doing, won't ever sell you something you don't need. And when you do decide to do something, you'll do it safely. So
I agree.
That's why I think a year ago when I was first launching, into this journey into the Med Spa board, I think one of the first things you said to me was, God, that's long overdue. I was like, oh my God, I've always liked you. So I really appreciate like all your input and everything. I think, we work in a really great industry.
It's the best. It's the best industry to be in.
I think we really help people feel good about themselves. It's like it's like fashion. It's like anything else. I feel good in my clothes. I feel good in my hair. I feel good in my skin. And I think, well, my hair's clearly gray right now, but I think that, it's with enough knowledge, people can go out and find the right place that's trustworthy. And I do think that like places like mine, we kind of collect advisors and reps like you and your partners who are just really reliable sources of information. And I think that's really, it's really unique. I think that the vast majority, if you walk into any med spa, chances are you will not be walking into a very trustworthy place. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but I think it's true. I think that there's really a lot of vetting that needs to be done before you can really trust what that person's telling you.
Because it's 2-to-1. And some say if we count plastic surgeons and dermatologists, it's 3-to-1, 3 med spas / aesthetic providers to every 1 Starbucks. That's where the 3-to-1 comes, or 2-to-1. That's a really big number. There's just so much to choose from. And, the average consumer can't negotiate the difference, and they don't necessarily know how to check. So other than word of mouth or, my friend did this and it looked great. There's certain things that make it really challenging for people to figure out where to go and who to see and what to get. And everybody just wants to look better and more youthful and get the right treatments for the right area. So I think with a little bit more understanding, like, the med spa board and maybe some vendors stepping up a little bit more to credential themselves, I think would help as well. I think that needs to be 2 sides, the provider side, the vendor side. I think if they stepped up, it might help.
I really would love it if any of the vendors would be interested in helping the Med Spa board succeed and spread the word. I think it's really interesting though, because there's this dual, like a company like that breast implant company, which is not really related to the med spa world really, but
no, it's not.
A company like that would be very interested in supporting the concept, right?
It's an interesting concept, and we'll see what happens, because a lot of the vendors, coming from the vendor side, I think a lot of the vendors are fatigued with having, complications and adverse events. And I always like to make analogies. If you and I were to go in today and buy a Ferrari of Seattle, we could buy it, but do we know how to drive it? Chances are we don't, right? It's the same thing with lasers or these medical treatments. You can buy them being a physician, but do you expect for that vendor to teach you how to drive a car like you did at age 16? You come in with your driver's license ready to drive, you know how to do it. You're going to be able to learn how to drive that Ferrari so much sooner and better. Right. But if you don't have your license and you've never taken driver's ed, the learning curve is going to be really high.
Right. Yeah.
So it's that one industry that we just don't have, other than the MD, we don't have a separate credentialing for aesthetics. We don't have a separate, we're just figuring out that OBGYNs don't learn about menopause, or we're just figuring out that you can be,
that's true.
You can be a Stanford trained physician and you never took a class on exercise or diet or nutrition. And it's like, to me as a consumer, that's so mind blowing that those weren't built into their protocols or their syllabus.
Well, lasers too. I mean, nowadays there are some programs in derm and plastic surgery that do teach about lasers, but many still don't. I'm old enough that, none of this existed when I was a resident, and my classmates who went into derm, they didn't do any aesthetics, and I a series of laser courses and stuff. It's
Yeah.
basically like driver's ed. But then once you do
Yeah.
have a particular laser, they're all very different.
Mhm.
You have to learn a
Yeah.
lot
They're very
about
different. Yeah.
how to use them and how to use them properly. And
Yeah.
then turn around and delegate that person who you're delegating it to really has to know their stuff. And a
Yeah.
lot of places are delegating to someone who has maybe a license, like maybe a nurse's license, but they don't know anything about laser physics, you know?
No,
Um,
no,
and
not at
so,
all.
yeah. And so it's,
Yeah, it's crazy. If you really step back and think about it, it's so crazy to think about. And I see
yeah,
it every day. I can call on anywhere from, 3 to 8 doctors, 3 to 8 practices a day is what I can see. That's the goal. Your
no,
company is going to mandate you to hit a certain amount of calls per day. So anywhere from 3 to 8, depending on what I'm doing, a demo or doing a lunch and learn. You have a lunch and learn 2 calls before, lunch and learn 2 calls after. That's kind of the standard. So in a month, I could see 100 accounts. Easy. And you'll have 50 that do it right, 50 that don't do it right. You
yeah,
sell them one device, like you'll have one doctor be successful, and then 10 feet down the road, you'll have another device with the same type of doctor and they're not successful. So there's no like rhyme or reason as to why one physician was successful and one account was unsuccessful, even though they're on the
mhm,
same street. You've seen that as well. So the business is so wide open in so many ways that at some point, that's why I was like, oh, well, thank goodness somebody's thinking about it, that we need a little bit more, credentialing. Who's the top tier? Who's a circle of excellence? When we talk about sales, we look for practices that are circle of excellence. Who is doing things really well? What does a
mhm,
circle of excellence customer look like? Those are the ones we like to go after first
mhm.
to stock our product or carry our device or sell our laser. Is we want the circle of excellence because we want to be in practices that are doing things good and doing it right, because then we're going to be successful and they're successful. But if you start to go down here, then you may not get the same success rate, and it's going to take a lot of time and energy to get these people trained up to here.
Right. The company could ultimately get sued if they
Yeah.
sell it to enough people who have no business
Mm-hmm.
operating the device. If there are enough bad outcomes, there could be some big lawsuits. I did a whole podcast about, the
Mm-hmm.
FDA came out and issued a warning letter about RF microneedling. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at what the lawsuits are about RF microneedling, they're all against one particular device, one particular manufacturer, because
Yeah.
they're really aggressive marketing, used some
Yeah.
really aggressive tactics, and sold that device to a ton of people who shouldn't really be using it.
Yeah.
And the
And
original
that's,
version of that device was a lot more dangerous than later
yeah,
versions. And so
sure.
that's where they ran into problems. But,
Yeah.
that company is going strong and everybody still, buys from them. so,
Yeah. But
so,
that's an expensive lesson too. I mean, that those things never bode well when you get those lawsuits for complications.
well, and it's an expensive lesson for every single one of those patients who didn't know that they were putting their face at risk, you know?
Yeah.
So knowing that our audience we have a lot of people who are in the industry, but
Mm-hmm.
then a lot of people who are patients and consumers in the industry. What two pieces of advice? One for our med spa owners and injectors out there, and one for our
Mm-hmm.
consumers. What piece of advice would you leave with them?
I think my biggest piece of advice for med spa owners and for practices is buy devices, equipment, products that you know that your patient demographic is going to be interested in and is going to be successful with. So there's numbers of ways you could do that. You could have your patient questionnaire, your patient intake form. They'll write in what they're looking for, what they're interested in. I see so many practices just decide to purchase, body sculpting or, oh, I'm going to do, RF microneedling, or I'm going to do a device where they haven't had that interest level, or they may not have the patient population for it, or that
Mhm.
device won't treat their patient population. So be really mindful about what you're bringing in so you're successful. The best way to do that is data mining with your own patients. What are they interested in? What do they want? Is that on your patient intake form? Are you reading it? Are you tracking it? So that's number one. Make sure it's matching your patient demographic. If you're treating all Fitzpatrick type 3s and 4s, then you don't buy a CO2 laser that doesn't handle those patients. And I see people do that. I've seen people do that. And I'm like, yeah,
and I would echo that. That's brilliant advice. And I would say the number one way to know that is the person who's doing all the consults, which of course in my practice was me.
Right.
You just know because people walk in and they're talking about the same kinds of things and the same desires and goals. And then of course you also know your patient population because you personally know them.
So that's number one. And then 1.5 would be for physicians and practices is know that your marketing is what you're going to get. So if you're out there fishing for the deal shoppers and the Groupons and you get the deal shoppers that only come in once and they never come back, then you can't blame, that patient, or you can't blame that patient population that you're attracting. Right. If you're attracting luxury, quality, circle of excellence, if you're marketing to that, then that's the type of patient you're going to get, not the patients that want it the cheapest or the fastest or, how you're marketing. So really make sure that your marketing is speaking to what you're looking for and to what you're aspiring to do. I see a lot of myths like, oh, we're trying to be luxury, but we just did a Groupon. And it's like, well, that doesn't fit. So I see that a lot. It's just, it doesn't match. They're like, oh, well, we don't understand why the patient only comes in once. And I'm like, well, they came in on a deal. Deal patients shop deals.
Right.
So that's number two. For patients or for consumers, ask the questions. What toxin are you injecting? What filler are you injecting? Can I see it? Just certain things to understand what treatments you're going to be getting, who's going to be doing it, what's their background. Those are simple questions that can be answered on the phone, the day of your appointment. And if it just doesn't feel right, or they're not answering the questions, with a good feeling in your being, then maybe you should hold off and go someplace else. So it's really important to have that trust and to have word of mouth. And especially if you're booking a big surgery like a facelift or a breast aug, or you're doing med spa, or you're doing Botox and filler and laser treatments, and there's multiple treatments. If I buy a package from a med spa, are they going to be around for treatment 3, 4, and 5? That happens. We see that happen all the time.
Yep.
I bought a laser hair removal package. I bought 10 sessions, and after 3 sessions, they closed. So really, as a patient, you have to do your due diligence when you're investing in yourself and in treatments. So just ask the questions. A legitimate account is not going to care that you're asking the questions. If you're legitimate, you're not going to be offended by those questions. You're going to welcome those questions.
Absolutely. And ask them to get certified by the Med Spa board, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do that due diligence for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So if they're labeled certified by the Med Spa board certified, then that means that they have already proven that they are legal and legit, and they do have a medical director, and they are using real products, and they're prepared for emergencies. And one thing to know is we have a national set of requirements. So local laws are different in every state, but our requirements apply to everyone across the country. So that even if another state is more rigorous than your state, that we use the same rigorous criteria for every single spa across the country.
It's great. It's great that you're diving into this to add, something else to your plate.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know you're busy, but, I think it's really going to help.
Well, we're really excited. We just launched, and we're offering half off for the first 100 spas. So sign up now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Rachel, thanks so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate your input.
I'm glad I was able to do it now that I'm not in a pharma sales role. So it's really exciting.
I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for so long. So I'm so glad we got to have this conversation. Hopefully, as new interesting things arise in the world, maybe you'll be able to come back on and we can talk about that.
Yeah, of course. I would love to.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful, do me a favor and share it with a friend who's considering any aesthetic treatments. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment telling me your biggest takeaway. I actually read them all. Let's keep each other safe and elevate the standards in the med spa industry.